Hello, this is Camille Fairborn from Utah State University, and I'd like to welcome you to today's CAUSE Teaching and Learning webinar. I'm pleased to introduce Dr. Hollylynne Lee as our speaker today. She is a full professor of mathematics and statistics education at North Carolina State, and her topic today is Designing Opportunities to Learn to Teach Statistics, Lessons from a MOOC for Educators. The way that webinars work is that all listeners are muted during the webinar. You can ask questions at any time by typing them into the questions box. We'll be sure to ask those questions toward the end and give Hollylynne a chance to respond. You can also use the chat box if you're having any technical questions. At this point then, I'll turn things over to Dr. Lee. Hollylynne, go ahead.
All right, thank you, Camille. So hello, we were trying to get the webcam to work earlier and it was not being successful, but just please know that I am smiling at you and that I am here. There is a real person on the other side. But I've been engaged in the last couple of years in designing and implementing and then starting to research the impacts of a MOOC for educators that we built here on teaching statistics through data investigations. So I want to tell you a little bit about that. So it was first launched in spring 2015. We do offer it for free. It was funded through a grant from the Hewlett Foundation, and it's part of a bigger effort going on here at NC State as part of a MOOC for educators, where several MOOCs specifically designed for either classroom teachers or educational leaders were being developed. And in our particular MOOC, we're focused on pedagogy, about aspects of teaching, rather than on statistics content itself, though you can't help but talk a little bit about content when you talk about pedagogy on teaching statistics. And I made a very purposeful decision that if I was going to engage in doing something that was going to be this much effort, that I wanted the MOOC to be usable by a broad range of those interested in teaching statistics. So I purposely designed it that it should be useful for teachers from students in middle grades, like around age 12, through introductory college courses. And that has proven that that is the audience that it attracts. Occasionally I get some elementary teachers in there, but the vast majority are middle school, high school, and collegiate level instructors. And my really big goal is to equip these teachers and instructors with tools, frameworks, resources, and different skills that can really help them think about teaching statistics as this investigative process, particularly with using real data sources and great interactive technology tools. Because as many of you, I'm sure, I'm speaking to the choir here, that you can't do much in statistics without really good technology tools. So this is not a solo effort. We did have a very large design team. So that is, if I have not met you before, that is me in the middle with the short, very graying hair. And I had a team of Dr. Yun Tran, who was a postdoctoral research associate with me at the time. Jen Lovett, who was my doctoral student, is now a professor at Middle Tennessee State. And Teresa Gibson, Alex Dreyer, both come with, Teresa comes with lots of classroom math experience, and she was our overall project manager. And Alex Dreyer comes with lots of experience from EDC, the Educational Development Center, in designing curricula and being kind of a leader in instructional design across all different kind of contents, not math or stat specific. And then I have what I called my magic makers, and that is Mark Sandberg at the bottom and Ben Robinson. Mark really designed a lot of the technological capabilities within the MOOC, and Ben was our fantastic videographer. This is, as I just want to emphasize, designing something this big takes a small army. So we purposely decided, and this was decided before I started developing the teaching statistics MOOC, was that we were going to do things on in a custom platform after really looking at places like edX and Coursera. Those platforms didn't really have enough options for the designers here at the Friday Institute to do things differently and to really base the courses on sound design principles in online learning, as well as effective professional development. So they really started the project with doing literature reviews on effective professional development and coming up with design principles. And every MOOC-Ed that comes out of the Friday Institute has to have a design plan that adheres to these principles. So those four that I have listed here: self-directed learning, learning from multiple voices, peer-supported learning, and job-connected learning. And I'm going to give some examples of things that I designed in the MOOC related to the first two. So in all of my design, kind of the biggest challenge for me was how could we design for the M in MOOC, the massive, and the O for open, and still hope for any impact. And when I think about that, even though I had said that I wanted to attract teachers and instructors from middle grades through college instructors, the background in statistics or the experiences that these people may have had in teaching statistics are going to vary greatly. And so in thinking about the, if I wanted to attract more people to get that massive, I then had to also consider the openness of it, that it's going to attract anybody, and I had to be prepared for a wide variety of background. There were no prerequisites to actually sign up for this course. If you're interested, come. And that poses design challenges as far as what you can engage them in. So one of our big questions is to what extent does the MOOC offer opportunities for these teachers to engage in professional learning and impact their practices? And hopefully I can provide a glimpse at some of our answers to that today. So with the self-directed learning principle, one of the things that we did was we really tried to differentiate activities and resources that gave our participants opportunities to kind of personalize their experience in the MOOC. One of the things that I don't have listed on here with the self-directed is, unlike the courses that we teach at the university that I am very used to, as I'm sure many of you are, is that you give assignments and you expect them to do it. And that doesn't happen in a MOOC. So you have to be prepared for that, and you have to think about how do you structure it to suggest a path that they might take and to suggest orders of things that they should do, but not mandate it. And how do you motivate them to actually want to stay engaged and to be directed? And so part of that is also trying to allow for some differentiation. So for example, if I was having them analyze any student's work, I would try to have opportunities where there might be some middle school students samples of work, there might be some high school student samples of work, so that they can see the different ways that students might attack a problem. If I'm giving them tasks to consider, I would purposely label them and say that these tasks might be useful for middle or early high school students, and that these tasks these other set of tasks to analyze would be useful for high school or introductory college. I wanted to introduce them to a really good resource, and I know that there's been a webinar done on this project, the Locust project, and we gave them some sample assessment items so they could see what is conceptual understanding. If you're trying to assess that, what does that actually look like? And again, giving them opportunities to engage in items at different levels of sophistication. I also used the self-confidence survey developed by Lee Harrell Williams and many of her colleagues as part of our project a few years ago, that actually came out of the Research Advisory Board clusters in the CAUSE project. And they developed a survey, the Self-Efficacy for Teaching Statistics, and I give that in the orientation of the course as a way for participants to be able to kind of self-regulate. All right, what do I already feel comfortable doing, and what do I perhaps need to direct some of my attention to? And that can help them set goals for their course experience. They again get to do that at the end to kind of see if they've made some any progress, or areas that they still want to kind of chip away at. They also have lots of different ways to demonstrate their learning. We don't use quizzes in as if I was teaching a statistics course to assess their understanding of particular concepts. That we do have very brief, like 1 or 2 question quizzes throughout, but they're not graded. They're more to kind of provide some feedback on things that they had just experienced or read in the course. So it's more of some giving immediate feedback. But they can do classroom projects, they can design classroom tasks. A lot of the demonstration of your learning occurs through the discussions in the forums, and I'll show you a few examples of that in a minute. They have the opportunity to get a certificate of completion. They can use these for CEUs. They can do either a 20 or 25 hour, depending if they want to do a project. And this fall, we're trying something new, and we are developing micro-credentials. So you may or may not have heard of kind of the movement towards having these very little micro skills that people could demonstrate and earning little badges. And we're going to try that out in the coming fall course. I've been very diligently trying to develop these micro-credentials over the summer. So let me move on. Examples of multiple voices. I absolutely did not want this course to be direct instruction or a single voice of me telling people how to teach statistics. That was not the purpose of this. So I brought together experts to form a panel, and you can see in this upper right picture here, we've got Susan Friel, Webster West, and Christine Franklin. And I really felt like these represented different voices within the statistics education community that could speak to middle school teachers, that could speak to high school teachers, and that could connect with collegiate level instructors as well. They all had lots of different experiences over their careers and brought really nice, interesting perspectives. And we sat around for an entire, almost a day. The 4 of us sat there at that table for about a day filming this panel, and then we cut the heck out of it and created different snippets of different conversations that we wanted throughout the unit, throughout the MOOCs in different units. We also have different classroom videos of students and teachers engaged in statistics tasks so that participants can actually see things in action that we're talking about in the MOOC. But we really had a very, very difficult time finding classroom videos. And there wasn't a whole lot of time. Getting permission to do this is not that easy. So we took a lot of my research from students and teachers' work with technology in solving probability and statistics tasks, and we created animated videos representing those students' work. So these are based on what real students do in classrooms and real classroom conversations, but we're not using the real video, we're using an animated version of it. Those seem to be a big hit as well. We were a little nervous on how well those were going to work out, and they seem to work out fine. But another really, really key multiple voice is actually the participants themselves. In the discussion forums, they're exchanging their ideas on various topics, and you get to see communities, the small communities forming, and experts kind of emerging within the discussion forums. So one of the key things that we developed in the MOOC was a framework. Anybody who has engaged in design work or research knows that having a framework, having a lens, having constructs that kind of anchor you is a very useful thing to have. So we started with the GACE frameworks, both the K-12 and the collegiate level ones from 2007. And we really thought about, since then, what have we learned about students learning in statistics from different research. And we developed our own kind of concise framework that we called Students' Approaches to Statistical Investigation, SASE. And there's 3 really core components to that framework. The fact that we need to be doing statistical investigations in a cycle. You'll see in the center, the pose, collect, analyze, interpret. That when we're doing statistics, there are productive habits of mind, and we represent those in this diagram with little thought bubbles. And that as you progress in doing statistical thinking, you're going through different levels of sophistication. And in this particular diagram, the inner level, level A, and level A, B, and C is language that's used from the GACE framework from the K-12 framework. So, but you know, this allows some common language to be used throughout the course. For example, we created a task evaluation and development guide to allow our participants to take a look at tasks and say, does this promote worthwhile statistical thinking, and why? And can you use the framework to support your rationale? So what have we done? So as I said, we started this in spring 2015. Well, we started the design in 14. The course first launched in spring 2015. Since then, we have run it 4 times. And over those 4 times, we just pulled this data last week, and we've had 2,478 educators register for the course. We've now hit all 50 states in the U.S. and exactly 84 countries around the world. And I thought you all might be interested to know that 450 professors have actually registered for the course over those 4 different runs. They're either located in universities and colleges or community colleges. We get a good number of community college faculty that engage with us in the MOOC. They live in either mathematics or statistics departments, or they could be math teacher educators living again either in a math or stat department or in a college of education. And I've actually, surprisingly, to me anyway, have sociology professors in there and educational research faculty in there talking about teaching statistics to their audience. This is just a glimpse of our worldwide coverage. You'll notice that the vast majority are here in the U.S., but we have a good contingency from Australia and New Zealand, India, and the U.K., and Italy kind of comes in there. So we're making a pretty big impact and giving some opportunities for some cross-cultural conversations around issues in teaching statistics as well. Very, very briefly, for those of you that have ever engaged in a MOOC, if you think about most MOOC participants, they start off strong and then they either life gets in the way, or they get too busy, or they're not interested in the content, or they find out they sign up for a MOOC that they're really not prepared to finish, and they kind of drop off. And so we see the same type of participation trends here. But one thing that is really interesting is that we make a purposeful choice that when the course is done, we leave it open for several more weeks. And we see sustained, if not increased, activity after the official kind of close date of the course. And that has actually led us to doing some different models on how we leave access to the courses open. Just to give you a very brief snapshot as far as discussion forums, that's one of the questions I tend to get a lot, is how do you handle all these discussions. So last spring in 2015, or 2 springs ago, the first run, we had about 800 people enrolled. Not everybody shows up, so all 800 of those people don't actually come and engage in the course. But of those that did engage in the course, 308 of them actually contributed to the forums, and we did not count like introducing yourself in the first orientation. And of those that were contributing, I mean, the mean number of posts for them was about 7. Throughout the entire course. But interestingly, there's more, when we looked into the data, there's way more discussion views than there are posts. And there's many participants that actually lurk in the forums, which tells me that they see value in reading about what other people are talking about, but they don't feel comfortable, or it's just not their style to actually participate in those forums. But they spend time there reading them. The forum strategies that I use is I visit occasionally. I kind of call it a sprinkling method, where I go in and I make sure that I'm seen in the forums, but I am not in every single thread. I'm not a key part of those discussions. But I do send bi-weekly emails that I've ran this enough that I can actually write those right before the course starts and just put them on auto schedule, and they go out. And so they do hear from me on an every other week schedule. But we tend to have a project manager that tends to go into the forum and lurk. And if they're able to identify issues that might be coming up where somebody might be frustrated with something or wants an explanation about something, and then I would go in and address those. And one of the things we learned is these communities form on their own, and forum discussion leaders emerge. Every single time I could point to a few leaders that have emerged in the forums that they actually tend to be in there and kind of like moderating things themselves. They just kind of take on that role. So let me give you a very, very brief tour of one of the units. So this is the one that is live now. This is summer 2016, and it's still live, so if you're interested, you can still register for it. And we're going to go down and take a look at Unit 3. That's where I present the entire framework. We kind of are building up to that in Units 1 and 2 and certain aspects of it. And I'm just going to click on one of these so you can just see the structure of how our pages are laid out. So every unit has the components that are listed here on the left-hand side. You see a brief video from me that talks about the core constructs in the MOOC. We have Engage with Essentials, where there's a few brief readings or to watch. We try to keep it, this actually has 4 of them, and usually we have 3. This actually includes another video of me illustrating some aspects of the SASE framework. Anytime we write something in a PDF, it has to be like 3 pages at the most. I mean, these things are brief. You have to get to the point. Again, you can't assign readings like you can in an undergraduate or a graduate course. So you're hoping that they're going in there and reading it. We have a Learn from our expert panel, and as you saw in the picture before, you can, I'm going to pull up here.
This would be more appropriate most likely for high school.
They do have the elementary and middle ones.
They do have the elementary and middle ones, but the task that I am going to reference is actually in the high school one, and that is the NCT and navigation books. Right. And the data analysis and probability NCT and navigation books are excellent.
Yes, they are.
And the one that I'm going to mention is in the 9 through 12 book. It's the chapter on the discrimination activity. And
so I'm just going to stop it there because I just wanted to give you a little snippet. But in this particular expert panel, the topic that we were talking about was designing tasks and what makes a good statistical task. And here, Chris is really, she chose kind of one task to highlight, and I didn't know before our conversation started that that was going to be a task that she was going to highlight. And she highlighted that, and I was actually able to get that task available, and you can see above the video I have a link to that PDF. So Chris talks about that task, and then I link to that task from the document that she was referencing. Earlier in that conversation, Susan Friel had talked about one of her favorite data sets, a roller coaster data. After our conversation, she shared that data set with me, and we have it available for participants here in the MOOC. So we have these whole group discussions, but then we also have individual interviews where in each of the different units I have at least one interview with Chris, and I have one interview with Webster and another interview with Susan, where we're kind of going through looking at a particular statistical concept or idea. And those have been really highly rated as effective videos by our participants because they give, they dive a little bit deeper into conceptual understanding and what that actually looks like, but they're long, so they completely are optional. So we usually try to keep our videos very short, and those interviews are kind of, you know, sometimes 30 or 40 minutes, so that's pretty long. But we can also see where they actually, I'm going to go back into the dive into data. Every unit has an opportunity where they can engage in a task and use a technology tool to solve that task. So in this particular dive into data, it is it's a task where you're trying to choose the dye company that you think has fair dye, and that there's a whole story behind it. And one of the participants actually in our first run created this GeoGebra simulation, and then in later runs I embedded it. I got that participant's, Steve Phelps, permission, and we now use that as part of our MOOC. But Webster West also built a little applet within StatCrunch for doing this task, and we point users to that. And we also give them files if they want to use something like Tinkerplots or Fathom, because many middle school and high school teachers have access to that. So they get to experience a real data task that they could use in their classroom. Then they get to go and look at students' work on that same task. And this is an example of where we used animations. This is a task that I've used in a lot of my research. So we have the animations here that they can watch and think about. And then they come down here and discuss what they thought about what the students were doing. So in here, I just want to give you a brief kind of example of some of the things that people are talking about. For that task, I had given that task one time to AP Stat students, and I use a clip of that in the animation where I show some of the work that those AP Statistics students did with this task. And it's a very nice example of AP Stat students applying a chi-square test. They actually just don't they make a type 2 error basically, and they run it 100 times, and they run the simulation 100 times to collect their data, and then they make their decision. But in this particular discussion thread, some of the one of the participants says, I would really like to ask the AP Stat students these questions. And she starts this very nice thread of how you might discuss things. And then there's somebody who contributes to this and says, well, actually what they did was the chi-square test, and they ran a specific kind, and this is the kind of error that they made. And they get actually into a little bit more of the statistics behind what those AP Stat students were doing. So there's really this nice discussion here that started out pedagogical, and then a participant actually added in some more statistical meat to it that really I thought provided a very nice nice discussion around that. Also with the discuss with your colleagues, so they have a discussion in the investigate, and then they have an open forum where they can discuss anything that they've been learning about. And so you can just see, so this was actually a pretty popular one. Why do stats textbooks do this? And somebody posted this, and he was really wondering, and then there's this really nice thread of discussions around what people see in different textbooks and what they would like to see in textbooks. So again, that was not something that I prompted. And then we always have extend your learning, where we provide different resources. So very quickly, I just wanted to tell you a little bit about what we've been trying to analyze research-wise. What changes have we been making, and what seemed to be triggering those changes? So we were coding all of the forum discussions and the surveys that people do end of unit. We also did follow-up surveys 6 months after the course and asked them for their opinion on how things have changed and what may have impacted their practice. So certainly, I'm going to skip ahead here. Some of the major impacts that we saw was this shift in perspective on what the nature of statistics is really about, and that they really are trying to improve their task design. They want to use all 4 phases. They start recognizing, hey, I really spend too much time on the analyze phase, and we don't do anything. We don't do much of anything else. They're really increasing their use of technology and use of real data. And the things that they mention when they're talking about these things are that the SASE framework has a huge impact. The classroom videos where they actually get to see in action. They talk a lot about that hearing from those experts in the panels really are changing their opinion of how to do things, and the different course activities that we do. So, you know, lots of teachers don't have a lot of time, and at least in middle school and high school, they get tired of going to all-day workshops. I thought this quote was kind of nice, you know, just recognizing that those all-day workshops can be painful and they're not really a lot of benefit. And, you know, here I am, I can do this on my own schedule, and I'm coming away with lots of ideas, and that they're very grateful for it. So we've got a grant, a small membership initiative from ASA to support 10 teams across the U.S. this next academic year. And we chose leaders who previously completed the course and asked them to build a team of colleagues in their local context to commit to doing the course together, and having local team meetings. So doing a blended approach where they're not just working in isolation in the MOOC and communicating in the forums, but they actually have a group of colleagues that work in their same context and are going to try to make some changes there at the local level. So we'll see how that goes. Hopefully I can report back on that next year and hopefully the success, but I'm sure there's going to be some struggles along the way. You may have questions for me, but one of the questions I would love to discuss, if anybody is interested, is how things should be similar or different when you're designing a MOOC for students learning of statistics, or even teachers learning of statistics, versus what I tried to do as far as teachers learning of teaching statistics. I think you would design things differently, and to have conversations about that. And I'll just leave this last slide up here. That's my contact information. There's a URL that you can go and access the course. Again, it is free. We are running it currently until the end of August, and then we'll start registration again, and the course will reopen from the beginning, September 26th, and run through December. We are developing a new MOOC-Ed, teaching statistics through inferential reasoning, that's kind of considered the follow-up to that first one, and if all goes as planned, it should be launching in 2017, spring of 2017. And I also have new NSF funding that is starting this month to develop e-modules for secondary stats teacher ed. And this involves a collaboration with Bill Finzer and his CODAP tool, which I believe he did the prior webinar with you all. And trying to think about how we can build modules that can be really used to help prepare middle and secondary teachers, and that will be easy for professional development providers and math teacher educators at a university to actually pick up and insert into their courses, and use a tool that's open and free and accessible that hopefully will then, that teachers can take into their classroom. Because as much as I love Fathom and Tinkerplots, schools still don't necessarily always have the monies to provide those, and they're moving away to wanting to have desktop applications. They want things that are web-based. So that's what we're going to be doing. So I will stop there and see if there was any questions.
Well, thank you very much, Hollylynne, for doing this today. I think what you're doing is really fascinating and looks to be super helpful to getting other people, and especially our K-12 educators, more up to speed with the statistics. I haven't had anybody ask any questions. Is there anyone attending who has any questions for Hollylynne? Just go ahead and type those into the questions box if you have them, or the chat, whichever. I'm really excited to see what you and Bill come up with the CODAP. We had Bill here in June. If you're interested in watching that webinar, it's on the CAUSE website.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't look like we have any questions. So again, Hollylynne, thank you very much for being with us today, and we look forward to seeing and having you back and telling us more about what you've created and what kind of impact you have.
So am I able to ask a quick kind of raise your hand question just for my own information?
Sure.
Sure. So I'd love to know how many of you have ever taken a MOOC?
Well, if you count me and the 4 people out of 12 who are attending, looks like we're about a third.
Okay. All right. And then how many have ever actually tried to design a MOOC?
Oh, now that scares me.
Oh, it scared me too.
Looks like we have a few people who've tried to design one as well.
Oh, very cool. Very cool. Yeah. Well, particularly those that, whether you have taken one or and if you haven't taken one and you'd kind of like to just even come in and lurk around, I really encourage you to take a look at it. You don't have to feel pressure to participate that much, but just go in and take a look around and see what you see as useful. And even just thinking about it, I can tell you that it changed the way that I thought about designing my my online courses at the university. So the ones that I actually can require them to do things.
Right.
You know,
yeah, experience with MOOCs has also influenced my design in my online classes too. So
yeah,
that's very generous of you to have this open and allow us all to look at it. And it looks like you've put together some really awesome things.
yeah. Feel free to download anything you want and use it at will.
All right. Well, thank you one more time, and we will see you all again at the next webinar, which we have not yet scheduled. So keep your eye on the CAUSE website and the mailing list for information about that.
All right, great. Thank you.
Thank you all for coming.